Hello again, aviators. Welcome back to the next video in the airspace series. In the last video, we talked about the different classes or types of airspace in Australia and what they mean for AROC holders. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to access what is known as a visual terminal chart, or VTC, which is a map that displays all of Australia's airspace, in particular close to those big capital city airports. So I'm going to show you how to access those maps and determine the presence and location of any such airspace in close proximity to your operation. So now you should be able to see my screen, and right at the top you can see that I have Googled Air Services, one word, Australia. Okay, Air Services Australia is the organisation that runs, owns and facilitates all of Australia's airspace, and therefore they are also the publishers and distributors of all relevant maps, charts and publications to do with Australia's airspace and Australia's day-to-day operations. So I've Googled Air Services Australia up here, and I'm going to click on the top link here, and what I'm going to show you how to do is access these VTC charts, maps via the Air Services Australia website from scratch. So we'll click the top link here, Air Services Australia. Okay, we can close this little acknowledgement here. And this is the home page of Air Services Australia. At the top of the screen, on the right, you will see this tab here, Resources. From here, we want to navigate to the top option, Aeronautical Information Products, in brackets AIP. So I'm going to click on AIP right here. What we see here is some conditions of use, some terms and conditions. We're going to scroll to the bottom of this page and we're going to click the button I agree. Here you will see a list of different components of what is called the Aeronautical Information Package or Aeronautical Information Publication, known shortly as the AIP. What we want to do is we want to come down to AIP charts, the second option here. I'll just try and zoom this in a little bit so we can all see. AIP charts. So I want to click that link, and that's going to open up to this menu here. You can see there's an effective date there as well, 27th of November 2025. This video is being filmed in December 2025, so these maps are now effective. Right down the bottom here, you will see VTC, and I want to click on VTC right here. Okay, what this does is produces a map of Australia with all VTC locations and their abbreviations. And as you can see, they are in the location of major aerodromes around the country. Okay, capital city aerodromes, big domestic and international airports, but also major regional hubs are included here as well and have VTC maps issued for their airspace. Essentially anywhere that you will see Class C or Class D airspace, there is a VTC for that location, and you'll be able to see all of that airspace. I'm going to use the Sydney VTC for today's example. So I'm going to click Sydney VTC, and that will open me up to the Sydney Visual Terminal Chart. Okay, now at first glance, you will see up the top here a legend. Now, I want to stress that only every second map on the list of VTCs that we just looked at will have a legend. This is because when the VTCs are printed and they are purchased as hard copies, they are two-sided and only one side will have the legend. Okay, so as you can see here, I'll just rotate this. Bear with me, it's a large file, so the screen is often quite laggy when we're playing around with these VTCs. You can see here that we're looking at the Sydney side. On the other side would be the Newcastle Williamtown side, and that side would not have a legend. So every second digital VTC on the Air Services Australia website will have a legend. So if you can't see it in one, go back and open the next VTC and you will find a legend. Speaking of the legend, if I scroll across just a little bit so that we can see the map here, I'll just rotate it again. Bear with me. I've just rotated the map and zoomed in a little bit, and I've just chopped that part out of the video as it was quite laggy. But what you can see here is the Sydney VTC facing the right way up. And what you probably see at first glance looks to you like an absolute dog's breakfast. Okay, there is a lot of information presented on VTCs, and to the naked eye it can be very overwhelming. But don't worry, the whole purpose of this video is to break this down so that it's plain and simple for you, and next time that you do look at a VTC, you can hopefully, number one, understand what you're seeing, and number two, if you can't understand, I'm going to show you how to navigate that legend. So let's have a look at the Sydney VTC's legend, which I've opened here in another tab. You can also see that I've highlighted certain sections and icons that I want to cover in today's video. So I'll just zoom that in a little bit more. Just let me turn off that highlighter as well. Okay. Let's look at this first column first. The highlighted item right at the top there says aerodrome, civil, certified, or military. Okay, so larger aerodromes, ones with paved runways, ones with some sort of regular public transport traffic, will have a solid magenta circle, okay, and the runways will also be marked with purple rectangles. Now, when would you need to go looking for these? Most often this is going to be when you're operating in uncontrolled or Class G airspace. You would consult your VTC and you would look for any of these aerodromes so that you know whether or not you need to carry a radio and exercise the privileges of your AROC while you're on the job. So this would mainly be for RPAS pilots doing their own jobs and conducting job safety assessments ahead of time. Again, for you AROs out there, you will always be operating at an aerodrome and you will have the benefit of knowledge and training of the local area. The next item down is aircraft landing areas, or ALAs. Now these are smaller aerodromes which do not often have any sort of regular public transport traffic, and they're not certified. Okay, they can be verified or unverified. We're not going to get into the meanings of all of that, but verified ones have a solid magenta circle, and unverified has a broken magenta circle, and you can see there's no runways marked there either. So when you are looking at aerodromes close to your area of operation, if you're operating in particularly uncontrolled airspace, make sure that you're looking for those two icons as well. Finally, we have helicopter landing sites, which are a magenta circle with an H, which a lot of you are probably familiar with just from popular culture and knowing what helipads look like. Let's pop across to the Sydney VTC and we'll try and find some examples of such aerodromes. Down to the north, the west of Camden, we have a verified ALA known as the Oaks. Okay, and you can see that there to the middle of the screen and to the left. Okay, the Oaks. I'm trying to move my cursor around that. Apologies if you can't see it. So that's an example of a broken magenta circle indicating an aircraft landing area. What you can see to the northeast, or to the top right of the Oaks there, is Camden Airfield. We'll talk about the blue circles around that later on, but you can see that Camden is a certified aerodrome, and therefore it has the unbroken or solid magenta circle with the runways marked. Don't worry too much about that star there either. So that's some examples of certified aerodromes and aircraft landing areas, or ALAs, and what they look like on a VTC. Back to the legend. We're now going to get into the markings that indicate to you that there is some form of controlled or special use airspace close to your location. So the first one we want to look at here is Class C and D, Class Charlie and Delta control zones, which are indicated by a broken blue line. If we go back to the Sydney VTC and we look at Camden again, you can see that at a radius of approximately 3 miles, which is not indicated here, this is just my own knowledge telling me that. We could get a map out and measure it, but we're not going to go into that much detail. At a radius of about 3 miles around Camden Airport, there is a broken blue line here, and you can see the letters CN. Camden's airport code is YSCN, or CN for short, and then the letters CTR, which is shorthand for Camden Control Zone. Okay, so this is a controlled aerodrome right here, and the control zone is the blue circle around it. Now, to see if it's Class C or D, I simply come down here and I can see the letter D, so I know that Camden is a Class D aerodrome. Now, to the right of that D, you can see a little fraction here, and the denominator, or the bottom half of the fraction, says SFC, and the top half, or the numerator, says 2000. What is on the bottom of the fraction is what we call the lower limit of our control zone, and SFC is short for surface. On the upper of the fraction there, it says 2000, meaning that Camden's control zone goes from the surface, or the ground, up to 2000 feet. If you were beyond that, okay, you would not be in Camden's control zone. We'll talk momentarily about the two types of airspace that lie above Camden's control zone. The next one down we're going to skip for a moment, and we're going to look at this solid blue line here, which is Class A, C, and D airspace. So this is very similar to the control zones, except the control zones are only in the vicinity, the close vicinity of a controlled aerodrome. And then we have the surrounding airspace, which could extend for up to 50, 60 miles away from that controlled aerodrome. Let's have a look at the Sydney VTC again. We'll zoom out a little bit and we'll have a look at Sydney Airport and the surrounding airspace. Okay, so right here at center stage, we have Sydney Airport. Okay, you can see the runways marked there and the same magenta circle indicating the presence of a certified aerodrome. Apologies if you can't see my cursor moving around. If I look above that, I can see SYCTR. Again, this is indicating this is Sydney's control zone here, which is marked by the dashed lines, okay, going all the way from Bankstown to the west, Gladesville Bridge, and the river and harbour up here, the bay areas and the harbour up here to the north, coming down the coast of the eastern suburbs and the Sutherland Shire here, past Maroubra and Cronulla, okay, and then finally across from the Shire out towards Holsworthy here. This dotted line here makes up Sydney's control zone. If I look next to that SYCTR, Sydney control zone, I can see C. So I know that Sydney is a Class Charlie aerodrome. The control zone itself goes from the surface up to 2,500 feet. Okay, you can also see Bankstown Aerodrome off to the west there, and that control zone goes from surface to 1,500. You can see that in both of these instances for Sydney, we have CLL down here, 2,500. So this means that above Sydney's control zone at 2,500 feet lies Class Charlie airspace with a lower level, LL stands for lower level, of 2,500 feet. So we have Sydney's control zone, and then above that, stepping up and out, we have Sydney's Class Charlie airspace starting from 2,500 and extending up pretty much to 60,000 feet unless there's any overlying Class A airspace, which I don't think there is in this area. Okay, so I've zoomed out a little bit here and you can see these solid blue lines in the shape of rings or ripples extending out away from Sydney. Now what we'll notice here, I'll try and highlight it. I'll use red. Okay, you'll notice that the lower level of all of these airspace steps, this is what we call them, steps, is getting higher and higher as we move away from Sydney. We have 2,500 in between Bankstown and Camden. Out towards the west where the new airport will be, we have 4,500 lower level. And then finally, we have Class Charlie starting at 7,500 feet. And you can see the overlying Class Alpha airspace there starting at 18,000 feet. So what we're seeing here is that airspace, that Class Charlie airspace moving up and out away from Sydney Airport in that upside down wedding cake shape that we discussed in the last video. So that is what these solid blue lines indicate. They indicate different layers of Sydney's Class C airspace as we get further away from Sydney. And again, that means that as these aircraft, these airliners, big QF1 A380 aircraft are departing Sydney, okay, they're getting higher as they get further away. What this means is that they will remain in controlled airspace, receiving that separation service as they get further away, but all aircraft below, such as those training aircraft coming out of Bankstown and Camden, will be in Class G airspace, Class Gulf airspace. So now might be a good time to mention that any airspace not marked on a map is Class G airspace or uncontrolled airspace. So where it says there's a lower level, any airspace below that, okay, that is not stipulated in that blue writing there is assumed to be uncontrolled airspace, and you are free to use that airspace as you wish within the confines of the law. Speaking of Class G uncontrolled airspace, we'll come back to that pink military control zone up the top, but for now, I do want to talk about some uncontrolled airspace and Class E airspace markings. So the first one you can see here is the brown solid line indicating the boundaries of Class E airspace. We'll have a look at that on the map shortly. What you can also see is the broken brown line indicating Class Echo or Class E frequency boundaries. So let's check those out on the map. So on the map here, we can see two things. Firstly, we can see the solid brown lines here indicating the start of Class Echo or Class E airspace. If I go to the southeast here, I can't see any brown writing, which tells me there's no Class E airspace here. However, at the top, to the northwest of this brown line here, I can see Class Echo lower level is 8,500 feet. So again, everything below that would be Class G, uncontrolled airspace, inside or beyond this line here. Okay, everything above 12,500, so that's flight level 125, 12,500, would be Class Charlie, up to 18,000 feet where the Class Alpha lower level exists. What we can also see is right here, this brown dashed line over here. So you can see there's no solid brown line, so we've still got Class Echo airspace here, but this is a radio frequency boundary, meaning if I'm to the southwest of this broken brown line, I would be using this radio frequency here written in brown. So the ML stands for Melbourne and the CEN stands for Centre, Melbourne Centre, which is referring to a big head office of Air Services Australia down in Melbourne. Melbourne and Brisbane have the two biggest radar zones on the eastern side of Australia, with Perth covering the remainder over to the central and western side of the country. So we would be using Melbourne Centre and we'd be monitoring them on 118.5. That's if we're VFR, visual flight rules. If we were IFR, instrument flight rules, remember that Class Echo is controlled airspace for IFR aircraft. So we would be requesting permission and a clearance to enter that airspace from Melbourne Centre on 118.5. Let's go back to the VTC legend now and let's have a look at what this green writing and these green markings are. So the solid green line here, notice it doesn't say it's a Class G airspace boundary, it just says there's a Class G frequency boundary. So that's the equivalent to the broken brown line, but for the uncontrolled airspace lying below 8,500. So as an example, if I'm a flight instructor and I'm taking my student out and I'm flying at 6,000 in this area over here, then I'm in Class G airspace. Now, if I pass from this area here where I'm speaking to, or I'm monitoring, I should say, Melbourne Centre 135.25, and I cross this solid green line here, then I would be talking to Brisbane Centre on 133.05. If I continue to the east-northeast up here and cross this solid green line at the top right of the screen, I would go from Brisbane Centre on 133.05 to Brisbane Centre on 124.8. Now it's important to note I have no obligation to be speaking to Brisbane Centre or Melbourne Centre if I am in uncontrolled airspace, but it is best practice if I'm able to monitor that frequency. The reason is I may at some point need assistance from air traffic control, or they at some point may wish to assist me. They also periodically put out new forecasts and relevant information to those that are listening. So it's always beneficial to have them playing in the background if your aeroplane is so equipped, or if you're an AROC holder and you have a VHF handheld radio. Now let's look at one more of those green markings. You may have noticed that we've gone from Melbourne Centre here to Brisbane Centre here. And that is indicated by this green line here, FIR boundary, with these little rungs coming off it. Okay, FIR boundary means Flight Information Region Boundary. So we're going from one radar zone of Melbourne to the next radar zone, which is Brisbane. Okay, so not only do we have that light green solid line, but we also have that darker thin line with the rungs coming off it to indicate that I'm going from Brisbane's radar zone to Melbourne's radar zone and vice versa. Back to the legend. As you can see in the box here, and we saw it on the map a moment ago, these boxes often have one frequency written in brown, one frequency written in green, and that one's pretty straightforward. If we're in Class E airspace, which is marked by those brown lines, we would use the frequency listed in brown. If we're in Class G airspace, we would use the frequency listed in green. Okay, finally moving on to the right-hand column, and we're going to now talk about what we call special use airspace. Special use airspace is made up of three different types of airspace. The main one for AROC holders that we need to be concerned with is restricted airspace. Okay, we also have danger areas and military operating areas. So military operating areas we're not going to touch too much on. They function fairly similar, at least for AROC holders, to restricted airspace. Now, restricted airspace is airspace that is run by Australia's military or defence force, and a permission is required, or a clearance is required to enter that airspace. It functions very similar to Class C or Class D airspace in that we need a clearance to enter, and we also need permission or clearances for anything that we wish to do while we're in such airspace. So if at any point we check a map as an AROC holder and find that we need to, our operation is inside a restricted airspace, we would need to seek a clearance to enter that airspace. So this one's mainly for RPAS pilots, and as you guys would know, there's further obligations there. You have to go to CASA and get your approvals to operate in that restricted airspace. Let's have a look at some examples of restricted airspace on the map. So here we have Richmond Air Force Base to the northwest of Sydney. As you can see, we have these pink lines here, or magenta lines I should say, with what we call frills. So I'll go back to the legend for a moment. Restricted areas are marked with these magenta lines here with what we call frills, these small lines coming off. Okay, now I refer to those frills as barbed wire as a reminder that I need to keep out. I need permission before I enter such airspace. So let's have a look at it on the map. Okay, this is Richmond RAF base. You can see those magenta lines with frills in a circle around the RAF base there, and then extending up towards the area that we were looking at before. So if I zoom in, you'll see that's a magenta line with those frills coming off. You can also see there's a designator there starting with the letter R, Romeo, and then 3 numbers. So sometimes there's also a letter tacked on the end of those numbers, but that is the designator for that restricted area, and we'll talk more about that in the next video, what that means and how we can use that to actually get information on the controlling authority of that airspace, and how we can go about seeking permission and seeking information from them about the nature of the airspace. Okay, the next one down is very similar but minus the frills, and that is a danger area. You'll see there's also a similar designator here, D, with 3 numbers. Again, there may be another letter after that, for example, D234A and D234B. Military operating areas look the same on the map too. So a danger area, the reason there's no frills or barbed wire there is we don't actually need permission to fly through a danger area or to operate within a danger area as AROC holders or pilots. What they are there for is to indicate the presence of a known hazard and just to let people know that that hazard exists, and if possible, stay away from that area. If you must operate within that area, then again in that next video I'll show you how to go about finding contact details for the controlling authority of that area so that you can call them and get or email them and get some information to make sure that your operation is a safe one. So let's have a look at some danger areas in the Sydney Basin. Down here south of Camden we have Picton and Wilton, where there is a fairly popular skydiving location. You can see that there is a magenta circle here, solid magenta line with no frills, and we've got D593 Alpha, and Delta 593 Alpha, and Delta 593 Bravo. We have the same fractions over here, surface to 7,500, and for the Bravo area it's surface to 4,500. We have a little skydiving symbol here, which is also on the legend, or a parachute symbol I should say. And over to the right here, we have a box telling us exactly what's going on in that danger area. It says intense parachuting activity. Some danger areas on the VTC will not have that box, and they won't actually tell you why that danger area is there. For example, this danger area to the west of Bankstown, right where the Badgerys Creek Airport is being built. You can see a weirdly shaped magenta line out here representing the danger area of D556 Bravo, surface to 4,500 feet. There's no special markings, there's no box to indicate why that danger area exists, and that's why the next video I'm going to show you is extremely important, so that if you come across something like this as an AROC holder, you know how to find additional information. So in summary, we've looked at all of these highlighted regions on the VTC legend. The first ones were aerodrome and helicopter landing site markings. We then looked at different types of airspace. Okay, we looked at controlled and military control zones and controlled airspace. We looked at Class Echo airspace, Class G airspace, frequency boundaries as well. And we looked at how to find frequencies. The last thing that I want to show you that I forgot to show you earlier is this purple box indicating the CTAF frequency for an uncontrolled aerodrome. We'll find an example on the map, the Sydney VTC. Let's look over here just near Wilton where we were before. We have this solid magenta line right in the middle of the screen there. Magenta circle I should say, right in the middle of the screen there for Wedderburn Aerodrome. Now if I was to scroll up, this airspace, this Class C airspace would start at, I imagine, 4,500 over Wedderburn here. So Wedderburn is from the surface up to 4,500 in uncontrolled Class G airspace. The CTAF frequency that we would use if we were operating in the vicinity of Wedderburn Aerodrome to monitor traffic and activity there is 122.55. Again, if that frequency wasn't listed on the map, just like there is no frequency listed for Wilton here, you would consult the En route Supplement Australia or ERSA to find the relevant frequency that you'd be monitoring in that area, and that's what I'm going to show you in the next video. Once again, I hope this video was informative, and if you still have questions after watching this video and reading the Moodle course content, please don't hesitate to reach out via the student support section of this course. I'd be happy to assist you further. I hope that the VTC as a map is now not so overwhelming for you to look at, and that you know your way around a little bit better. Thanks guys, and please tune in for the next video to learn about how to navigate the En route Supplement Australia or ERSA. Bye for now.